Welcome to Transcendental Basis Base of Vedic Knowledge. In Glimpse 4, today we will be taking up second set of organization features. The first set of organization features have been chapter-wise shlokas ranges, and today we will be taking up shloka-wise formats. This chapter-wise organization table is in sheet 2. This sheet 2 in column 1 gives the serial numbers as numbers of the chapters. Column 2 is the enlistment of uvachas. Column 3 is of ardha shlokas. However, here this 66 number which is mentioned in this column is in fact a three-pad shlokas. So this in fact is a independent category. However, here we are mentioning it under this column 3 as ardha shlokas, as it is here the only in this chapter that there is this class of shlokas. These compositions are only available here, so we are not making an independent category, and for the present are mentioning here in this column 3 itself. Column 4 is the column of the complete shlokas. Complete shlokas means a shloka of dvipadas, which are of 2 parts. Then ardha shlokas as such are shlokas of a single pada, single part. This is of a pair of parts, and these 3 padas are of triple parts. Then here is the total, and here is the grand total. Grand total is of 700 value. Today we shall be taking up this feature chapter wise, as chapter 1 is having 14 uvachas, 24 ardha shlokas, 66 shlokas. The summation value of chapter 1 of shlokas range is 104. We had seen that 104 accepts an organization 13 into 8, and further we had seen that within 4 space solids have a degree of freedom of motion, and as such 12-edged cube is having 13th edge, which manifests along the format of a degree of freedom of motion for solids in a 4 space towards its 4th dimension, and it takes and coordinates the origin, the seat, transcendental seat of the origin of a 4 space. Further we had seen that hypercube 4, the representative regular body of 4 space, is having domain boundary ratio a raised to power 4 is to 8 b raised to power cube. 4 space domain is enveloped within a solid boundary of 8 components. Within 4 space there is a setup of 13-edged cube. Therefore, static state cube of 12-edged in its dynamic state as of 13-edge swaps this 4 space domain. So this swapping in terms of the setup of 13-edged structural setup and having a limitation fixation for this domain in terms of 8 solid boundary components leads us to 104 components. So this feature is now being taken up a step ahead. Now the organization, this 104 is equal to 13 plus 8 takes us to 14 plus 24 plus 66. We know 14, if we see the formulation sapt, which simple rendering means 7, it gives us a TCV value 14. Further, value 24 is accepting an organization 4 is to 6, which is parallel to the dimensional frame of 6 space with 4 space as its dimension, and dimensional frame being a setup of such 6 creative dimensions. 6 creative dimensions means 4 space as a dimension. 6 such dimensions constitute a dimensional frame of a 6 space. 4 space which has been exhausted as and in terms of a cube of 13 edges and within a solid boundary of 8 components. This state, which initially was exhausted in terms of a dynamic state cube, means a solid body, now in this setup is as such is a static setup as it is enveloped within a solid boundary of 8 components. However, when this static state of 4 space, which is having a dynamic state within the creation, so 4 space as dimension in its static state is leading us to a setup of a dynamic state solid exhausting 4 space domain as it is enveloped within a solid boundary of 8 components. Therefore, this solid boundary which envelops the 4 space domain is containing this particular domain, though within it there is a dynamic state for the solids. So dynamic state solids are enveloped within a solid boundary of 8 components. Now it is this containing of a dynamic state solids within a solid boundary of 8 components as such puts it into a static state. Therefore, this static state of a dynamic state solid, so dynamic state solid means cube, means hypercube 3, means is setup of 12 edges. When it goes in a dynamic state, then it acquires the 13th edge, and further it in a dynamic state with the manifestation of this 13th edge towards the 4th dimension. Therefore, in terms of this dynamic state, the 4 space domain is being put in a static state. Therefore, the outward static state, because of a solid boundary, is in fact having a dynamic state within. So this dynamic state being contained within a particular zone, and it is a 4 space domain. So 4 space domain as such, though is in a static state because of a solid boundary, but otherwise because of the dynamic state of a solid, it is inward a dynamic state. One shall have a pause and take note that it is this feature of a static state of 4 space with inward dynamic state. So within 4 space domain there is a dynamic life, but otherwise 4 space in itself is in a static state. It is this dual features which deserve to be comprehended well. One shall sit comfortably and be face to face with this phenomenon of 4 space being in a static state, but otherwise within 4 space as a 4 space domain there is a dynamic state life for solids of a 3-dimensional setups having a degree of freedom of motion towards the 4th dimension. With this, now the feature of a format which we are now chasing from today with respect to chapter 1, now this static state 4 space body enveloped within a solid boundary of 8 components is having a dynamic life here within. However, otherwise it is in a static state. Now this 4 space body, when goes in a dynamic state, Now this dynamic state of a 4-space body would mean that it is a spatial dimensional order. Therefore this dynamic state is going to be of a spatial order. So it is in a spatial order this dynamic state is being reached. Therefore 4 space as a dimension will be taking us to 6 space. Therefore the dynamic state for the 4 space body amounting to a reach of a 6 space domain. Therefore the format of chapter 1 in fact is going to be format of a 6 space. Now let us have a fresh visit to a 6 space. We know 6 space is of a creative order, which would mean that 4 space is playing the role of a dimension of 6 space, and it is creating a dimensional frame of value 24. Further, we know that 4 space itself is of a spatial order, but here we are accepting 2 as a 1, and therefore we are taking value 4 and having 6 dimensions. Because we are taking here 2 as 1, that means 1 otherwise is of value 2. Therefore, and 1 we know is equal to half of 2. It will help us appreciate that chapter 1 is having 24 ardha shlokas. This ardha means half. Now half means because we are taking 2 as a 1, and means 1 becomes ultimately half of a 2. Therefore this value of a dimensional frame is going to be 2 into 4 into 6 is equal to 48. However, we are, when accepting 2 as a 1, we are accepting its half value. It is this feature, it is this value, it is this format which deserves to be comprehended for the ardha shlokas. The ardha shlokas here are 24. It would further be blissful to take note that ardha in fact is of TCV value 11 and shloka is of TCV value 16. It leads to value 27, and we know 24, 25, 26, 27. Therefore 24 as a dimension will be leading us to 27 as an origin. These are the features which are straightway available to us in terms of these formulations. These formulations are the shlok and the value 24 parallel to the value of the dimensional frame of a 6 space are the values and features which deserve to be comprehended well. One shall sit comfortably and be face to face with these values and features. Further, one shall open a new page. In this new page, one shall mention that today we are focusing upon the organization features, a set which makes the range of 104 value as 104 shlokas range of chapter 1 in terms of its internal organization as 14 vachas, 24 ardha shlokas and 66 shlokas. Now let us see that formulation sapt with simple rendering 7 here becomes TC value 40. This is happening as we are accepting 2 as 1 as a unit within the spatial order setup. So within the creators of space, 4 space itself is of a spatial order, which would mean that 2 space is playing the role of a dimension, which would mean that we are accepting 2 as a 1. It is this feature which will help us appreciate why 7 will ultimately unfold as a value 14, because 2 is 1 So 7 makes 14, and this will take us to TCV value sub is equal to 7. Now see what the setup comes to be. We are having a 6 space. We know 7 space is playing the role of a dimension, role of an origin of 6 space. So we will be having 7 streams flow, and as it is 2 as 1, so we will be having 14. So we will be having 7 streams flow on its upward as well in its downward situation. So this value 14 is because of the value of a flow of 7 streams downwards as well as upwards from the origin, seat of origin of a 6 space. It is this which will also take us to a raised to power 7 is equal to 14 b raised to power 6. And further we know 7 is the ank of a dhruv, a pole star in 7 space playing the role of origin of 6 space is the format of a pole star. Therefore, these features will help us appreciate the concept of a UVACH. The formulation UVACH is of TC value 15. It is equal to a 1 into 3 into 5, which is parallel to the solid dimensional frame of a 5 space. So solid dimensional frame of a 5 space means that here we are having UVACHs, means we are having the dimensional frames of solid domain. So 5 space as a solid dimensional order as such is the format of the UVACHs. And we know 7 space is playing the role of origin of 6 space, while 7 space itself is of a transcendental order. A 5 space is playing the role of the dimension of a 7 space. These are the features which deserve to be chased sequentially and very gently. Therefore, let us start revisiting all these features. With respect to the value 14 as 14 UVACHs, let us mention number 1, the formulation UVACH is of TC value 15. Number 2, value 15 is parallel to the organization 1 into 3 into 5, which further is parallel to the value of the solid dimensional frame of 5 dimensions of a 5 space. Further, we know that when we are having a range of a 15 points, then we will be having 14 gaps. Further, value 15 is equal to value TC value of a Tej, while value 14 is equal to TC value of a formulation Agni. With these concepts and these values and these features for the format of the formulation UVACH, we can take a step ahead and reach at value 24 of the Ardha Shloka. Here we should mention that formulation Ardha Shloka is of TC value 27. Further, the value 27 is interrelated with value 24 as a fourfold manifestation layer: 24, 25, 26 and 27. This as such is a fourfold manifestation layer of hypercube 26 with 27 space playing the role of an origin and 25 space playing the role of a boundary, while value 24 is the value of the dimensional order. Therefore, this value 24 as 24 Ardha Shlokas are the value which is parallel to the value of the creative dimensional frame of 6 dimensions of a 6 space. A step ahead now, let us see that when we are in a 6 space which is having a creative dimensional order, means 4 space playing the role of a dimension, and here there is a seat of a pole star 7 space as origin, which leads to 7 streams flow upward and 7 streams flow downward. This gives us a value 14 of the Uvachas, and here the dimensional frame gives us the value 24 of the other shlokas. Further, let us see that this 7 space at the origin is splitting the 6 space domain into a pair of 6 space domains. It is this feature of a split for a 6 space domain into a pair of 6 space domains will as such lead us to value 66. Make a note that chapter 1, which is an organization of value 104, is in fact is having a split of 14 vachas, 24 artha shlokas and 66 shlokas. These triple values 14, 24 and 66. These values are this as a vacha with a TCV value 15, this of a TCV value 17 and this of a TCV value 16 as a shloka. Now how see between value 15 and 16 there is a value 27, and we know value 27 is equal to 3 raised to power 3, which amounts to that there is a split for a solid dimensional 3 space dimensional frame of triple solid dimensions splitting themselves into a pair of 3 dimensional frames of half solid dimensions. It is this split and this is this reach, and then we know value 15 is the value of the dimensional frame of a 5 space, and value 16 is equal to 2 raised to power 4 is equal to the value of the dimensional frame of a 4 space. One shall sit comfortably, one shall revisit these features, one shall enlist these features, one shall be very gentle, very sequential, a very smooth transition as we are now reaching at the dynamic state format for the chapter 1. The first set of features, organization features, where we had been focusing upon a chapter-wise shlokas ranges of the total value, which with respect to chapter 1 is value 104. It has taken us to a format of a creator's space, a 4 space within which a solids 3 space bodies are having a degree of freedom of motion. Therefore, we are initially as organization features of set 1, we have been availing a 4 space format, hypercube 4 format as a representative regular body of a 4 space in its static state. However, within 4 space domain itself there is a dynamic state for the solids. Solids are 3-dimensional bodies. 4 space is a 4-dimensional setup. Therefore, the 3-dimensional frame within 4-dimensional domain gets a degree of freedom of motion. It is this degree of freedom of motion for the solids within 4 space domain which brings us face to face the phenomenon of a static state 4 space but having a dynamic state life for the solids within its domain. Now today, a step ahead, we are reaching at the organization features second set. Here in this set, we are trying to reach at chapter-wise format. So we are now at the initial stage had reached at a 4 space in its static state, though within 4 space domain there has been a dynamic life. But on the whole, as 4 space, is enveloped within a solid boundary of 8 components. Therefore, it essentially remains of a static state. From this static state of a force space, we are now reaching at a dynamic state for a force space. Now, force space is a spatial order space. 3 space is a linear order space, so the dynamic state of the solids with a force space domain essentially is of a linear format. However, force space being of a spatial order, therefore the dynamic state setup of force space is essentially of a dynamic existence phenomenon of a spatial order. Now it is this spatial order which makes force space in its dynamic state taking us to a 6 space. Therefore force space as dimension is creating 6 space as a domain. Therefore this set of organization, the set of organizations which we are now trying to chase, which we are now focusing, is a focus which takes from force space in the role of dimension to its creation of a 6 space as a domain. Therefore, the format of chapter 1 of Durga Saptashati is a format of a 6 space created by a force space. This creation of 6 space by force space is the feature which deserves to be comprehended well. Let us sit comfortably. Let us permit the transcending mind to be face to face with this creation phenomenon. Force space is a creator's space. Lord Brahma is the overlord of a force space. Lord Brahma is creator the supreme. The creator the supreme is the presiding deity of a creator's space, the force space. Now, force space is creating 6 space. The format of chapter 1 is the creation of a creator's space. Force space in the role of dimension is creating 6 space. It is this creation of a 6 space by force space in the role of a dimension is the format of a chapter 1. Now 6 space we know is having force space in the role of a dimension. Therefore the dimensional frame of 6 space is a setup of 6 creative dimensions. Each dimension is a force space. There are 6 dimensions. It gives us value 6 into 4 is equal to 24. Further, we know that force space itself is a spatial order space. That means 2 space is playing the role of dimension of a force space. However, we are now taking force space itself as a dimension. Therefore, we are taking 2 as a unit. Therefore, 2 as a 1. Therefore, 1 becomes of value 2. Therefore, when we are taking the value of 6 created dimension as 24, in fact, we are taking half of the total value. The total value is 2 into 4 into 6 is 48. The linear value 48 is the value of the dimensional frame of a 6 space, but out of it we are taking only half the value because 2 is being taken as a 1, so 24. As such, 24 are the shlokas. Now further we know that force space domain itself is permitting a dynamic state for the solids. Now it is this dynamic state for the solids is manifesting 4th dimension as a format for the 13th edge. With it we know 3 space is having 7 geometries range. 7 space is playing the role of an origin of a 6 space. Therefore, when origin transcends out, which means 13th edge which is coordinated with 5 space in the role of origin within 5 space, it means it is taking out 7 space with 5 space as its dimension. With it, the 6 space domain splits into a pair of 6 space domains. Now this split into pair of 6 space domains, when get coordinated, this amounts to a value 66. And then 7 space, when transcends out, it transcends out accepting 6 space in the role of a boundary, and we know a raised to power 7 into 14 b raised to power 6 is the domain boundary ratio for the 7th space. This will help us appreciate that there are 14 uvachas, there are 24 shlokas, ardha shlokas, and there are 66 shlokas. Therefore, let us have a pause here. Let us revisit all these features. Let us consolidate all these features. Let us be face to face with the formulation watch as of TC value 15, formulation ardha shlok of TC value 27, formulation shlok of TC value 16. Then value 15 is parallel to the value of the dimensional frame of 5 solid dimensions of 5 space. Value 16 is parallel to the value 2 raised to power 4 as the value of the dimensional frame of quadruple spatial dimensions of 4 space. Value 27 is the value which is of the organization 3 raised to power 3, which takes us face to face with the phenomenon of a split of a solid dimensional frame of 3 dimensions into a pair of solid dimensional frames of half dimensions. Therefore, these features as these are, when are taken a comprehensive view, this will help us appreciate that the first organization features take us to a format of 4 space in a static state, and then at the next phase, when as organization features second set are being taken, then we take 4 space in its dynamic state. It creates a 6 space, and it is this creation which help us reach at the organization of value 104 as 14, 24 and 66. Now let us see the way there happens to be a transition from the format of chapter 1 to format of chapter 2. See, chapter 2 is a scripture of 69 shlokas. Chapter 1 is a scripture of 104 shlokas. See the difference value. The difference value of 104 and 69 is 35, and value 35 is equal to 5 into 7. See, this value 5 into 7 takes us to a grid 5 and a 7, and it takes us to a 6 place value system with double digit numbers being 35. Now it is this setup difference which becomes a transition format. The transition format from chapter 1 of 104 value to chapter 1 of value 69, difference value 35. This is of a grid 5 into 7. It takes us to double digit numbers of 6 place value system, and further we know that within 6 space, 7 space is playing the role of an origin, and 7 space itself is having 5 space as its dimensional order, and it takes us value 35. So therefore, when 7 space as an origin transcends out of 6 space, then it takes away along with it as many as value 35, means it transcends out along the grid format 5 and 7, and that means out of the total initial value 104, 35 values transcends out and there remains a balance, a value 69. It is this value 69, it is this transcendence out of a 7 space as an origin from a 6 space domain. Now we have to chase it. We have to chase this format, the format which at this stage of chapter 1 is a format of 4 space in a dynamic state. That means creative dimension is creating a 6 space domain. 6 space domain is a domain which has 7 space in the role of an origin and 5 space in the role of a boundary. Further, 5 space is playing the role of a dimension of a 7 space. When this 7 space as an origin transcends out, that means it takes away along with it a value 5 into 7 is equal to 35. That means when 7 space is transcends out, when 7 space as origin is transcending out of 6 space, the balance what remains for the 6 space is value 104 minus value 35. Remaining value is 69. It is this feature which deserves to be comprehended well. Let us make a specific note. The transition from the format of chapter 1 to format of chapter 2 is a transition phenomenon which is of the features and values of a transcendental dimensional frame of 7 dimensions of 7 space in the role of an origin transcending out of a 6 space domain. Let us have a pause. Let us note down the transition from the format of 6 space of chapter 1 created by a 4 space domain to the format of chapter 2 is of the features of 7 space as origin transcending out of a 6 space domain. This transcendence phenomenon of 7 space origin from 6 space domain as such means a phenomenon of a 7 space within a dimensional frame of 7 transcendental dimensions. 5 space as a dimension, 7 such dimensions, take a value 35. It is this value 35 which is the value of the transcendental dimensional frame of a unity state, a 7 space. Pole star 7 space body is existence phenomenon within a transcendental dimensional frame of 7 dimensions. 7 dimensions of 5 value create a dimensional frame for a pole star for 7 space. This transcendental dimensional frame transcends out of a 6 space domain. With this transcending out of 5 into 7 value is parallel to transcending out of double digit numbers of 6 place value system which otherwise are accommodated by 5 cross 7 grid. Therefore, the transition format from chapter 1 to chapter 2 is a 5 cross 7 grid. Let us note down that transition phenomenon from the format of chapter 1 to chapter 2 is of following features. Number 1, this is of value 35 as a difference value of 104 and 69. Secondly, 35 is equal to 5 into 7. Thirdly, 5 space plays the role of dimension of 7 space. Fourthly, the transcendental dimensional frame of pole star is of 7 dimensions with 5 space playing the role of a dimension. Further, 7 space is playing the role of an origin of a 6 space. Next, Once this 7 space as an origin transcends out of 6 space domain, that means this transcendence is a phenomenon of happening within a transcendental dimensional frame of 7 dimensions of value 7. Now value 35 is accommodated by 5 cross 7 grid. This 5 cross 7 grid accommodates all the 35 double digit numbers of 6 place value system. With these features of transition from the format of chapter 1 to the format of chapter 2, we stop here. We will be taking up the format of chapter 2 in the next session, and then thereafter we will be having a comparison of the format of chapter 1 with format of chapter 2, and in between the transition format of 5 cross 7 grid of 35 double digit numbers of 6 place value system of the transcendental dimensional frame of a pole star. And all these features, when will be coordinated and when will be given a comprehensive view, it will take us parallel to the organization format features of Shri Durga Saptasati. By being parallel with these format features, we will be parallel to the transcendental base of the Vedic knowledge. Therefore, Vedic knowledge is to be taken as Vedic systems. So, Vedas as knowledge are having its own unique system. These unique systems, the Vedic systems, are approached in many ways. Then the first way is to approach it as Sankhya based, so in terms of number values. Then it is approached as a yoga based, as geometric formats. Then it is based along a Purusha format, means of value 24, means of 4 cross 6, means of a creative dimensional frame. Then it is taken as a natural order, means 8 space playing the role as Asht Prakriti, which is of value 29, which is value of the Brahma, which is the value of the format features of the presiding deity of the creators of space, and then the existence phenomenon as a whole, which will take us to the enlightenment as to how Lord Brahma, Creator the Supreme, meditates within the cavity of his own heart and attains the grace of the goddess and of the transcendental Lord, and with this grace Lord Brahma multiplies tenfold as a 10 Brahmas, and with it the entire existence phenomenon is being approached as a single whole phenomenon, as integrated phenomenon, making it Vedic knowledge as a single discipline knowledge, and all range of disciplines which we are presently trying to approach by their classified localized values systems, those as such melt away within the Vedic systems. So Vedic knowledge is a unified single discipline of a knowledge for the existence phenomenon in its entirety. From this phase and stage, in the next session, we shall be taking up a comparison of the formats of chapter 1 and chapter 2, and then we'll be having a transition from the format of chapter 2 to format of chapter 3, and then we will be having a comparison of the transition of chapter 1 to 2 and transition from chapter 2 to chapter 3. Thank you very much.